Emily's heart raced as she wiped down the last of the polished countertops at the Red Oak, a trendy, upscale restaurant nestled in the heart of Los Angeles. The evening rush had settled, and the restaurant, known for its impeccable service and celebrity clientele, was finally quiet. Or at least, it seemed quiet, until the door swung open. She looked up from her task, a towel in hand, as a few heads turned. A couple of people whispered excitedly to each other. The usual hum of conversation was drowned out by the unmistakable buzz of a room full of people recognizing a celebrity. She saw him. Justin Bieber, the pop sensation, the name everyone knew and loved, or hated. He walked in, his signature shades on despite the dim lighting of the restaurant. His presence was magnetic, impossible to ignore. The room fell silent for a split second, everyone frozen in awe. And just like that, whispers broke out again, this time louder. "Is that Justin Bieber?" someone asked from across the room. "Holy crap, it is," another voice exclaimed. Emily's palms suddenly felt clammy, but she forced herself to stay calm. This wasn't the first time a celebrity had walked into the restaurant. After all, it was a popular spot for A-list stars. She'd served her fair share of famous faces, from actors to musicians. But there was something different about this time. Maybe it was the way Justin carried himself, or the way everyone's eyes followed him as he moved through the restaurant. His aura was electric. "Emily, can you take his table?" the manager, Frank, called from across the room. Emily looked over at Frank, his sharp gaze already expecting her to take charge. It wasn't a question. It was an order. Her stomach churned. She had been working here for almost a year now, and she knew this could be a big moment for her, if she didn't mess it up. "Sure," she replied, trying to sound more confident than she felt. Taking a deep breath, Emily grabbed her pad and pen and walked toward his table. As she approached, she couldn't help but notice the tension in the air. Justin Bieber, the guy everyone either adored or loathed, was sitting there, surrounded by his entourage, a few fans hovering near the edges of the restaurant, sneaking peeks. He glanced up as she arrived at the table, a slight nod acknowledging her presence. His face was partially obscured by the sunglasses, but she could still see his striking features, sharp jawline, tousled hair, and a hint of weariness in his eyes. The buzz around him had suddenly quieted down, almost as if the room was holding its breath, waiting for something. "Hi, welcome to the Red Oak," Emily said, trying to sound professional. She forced a smile. "My name's Emily, and I'll be taking care of you today." His lips curled into a faint smile, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Hey," he said, his voice calm, though there was a hint of discomfort there. "I'm not really sure what I want. I guess, what would you recommend?" That was it. The moment she'd been waiting for. The celebrity who could have any dish on the menu had turned to her for advice. "Think, Emily. Don't mess this up." "Sure," she began, collecting her thoughts. "The blackened salmon is a fan favorite, but if you're into something more light and fresh, the grilled veggie salad is amazing too. And for dessert, the chocolate lava cake is." "Yeah, no," he interrupted, his hand brushing through his hair in frustration. "I'm actually having a bit of trouble deciding. Can you just help me with this? The whole menu thing. It's a lot." Emily's brow furrowed. He seemed unusually flustered. Most celebrities, at least the ones she'd met, had a bit of a swagger about them. But Justin Bieber? He looked different. He looked out of place. "Of course," she said gently, her tone softening. "I can help. Let's start with the drink first. Something to calm your nerves." He chuckled, though it wasn't his usual charismatic laugh, it sounded more like an exhale of relief. "You have no idea. A glass of red wine would be great, thanks." As she turned to walk away, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. She'd heard rumors about the challenges Bieber faced in his personal life, his struggles with fame, his battles with mental health, and the constant media scrutiny. For a moment, she wondered if what she was seeing in front of her was the real Justin Bieber, or just the version the world had come to expect. The bartender prepared the wine while Emily returned to the table. As she set the glass down, she noticed the subtle tension in his posture. His shoulders were hunched, and he kept glancing over his shoulder, as if looking for a way out. "Thanks," he said quietly, not meeting her eyes. "No problem," she replied. "Take your time with the menu. Let me know if you need anything else." But as Emily walked away, her mind started racing. The sudden sense of discomfort Justin seemed to be experiencing piqued her curiosity. Sure, he was a celebrity, and yes, everyone in the room would likely take photos of him as soon as he stepped out the door, but it wasn't just that. There was something more. Something human. Before she could get back to the kitchen, a faint cry broke through the background noise, a voice calling for help. It was Justin. He'd accidentally knocked over his glass of wine, spilling it all over the menu and his lap. The room went silent, and all eyes were on him. For a moment, Emily thought she heard a soft sigh, a fleeting moment of vulnerability. The last thing he needed was to be the center of attention for all the wrong reasons. Without thinking, Emily rushed over. She grabbed a cloth from a nearby table and quickly wiped down the mess. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice calm and steady, though her heart pounded in her chest. "Let me get you a new glass." "No, it's fine," Justin muttered, a faint smile on his lips. "Really? I'm just a bit off tonight, you know." Emily nodded. "I get it. Don't worry, accidents happen." She looked at him, then back at the restaurant, where everyone was still watching. "You need some space." Justin looked around, noticing the growing crowd. He sighed, clearly uncomfortable. "Yeah, maybe. That'd be great." Emily gave him a reassuring smile. "Don't worry, I'll make sure no one bothers you." As she walked away, she couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just another celebrity encounter. Something about Justin Bieber's vulnerability, his discomfort with the attention, hit her in a way she hadn't expected. She felt like she had just witnessed a side of him that no one else seemed to see. And little did she know, this moment would change her life forever. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Emily couldn't stop thinking about Justin Bieber after their brief interaction. It wasn't just the spilled wine or the awkward tension that filled the air when everyone in the room had turned to watch. It was the way he seemed so human. In that fleeting moment when he confessed to being off tonight, she saw something in him that was different from the media persona, vulnerability. She couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that Justin Bieber, the global superstar, wasn't just the guy everyone saw on their screens. It was like he was trapped in a life he couldn't escape, and tonight, he was showing a side of himself that no one usually saw. Emily couldn't shake that thought from her mind. As she walked back to the kitchen, her mind raced with questions. Why did he feel so off? Was it the constant pressure of fame, or was there something more going on beneath the surface? For a moment, Emily considered asking him, but then she remembered, she was just a waitress. He was just another celebrity who'd probably forget her name the moment he walked out the door. But that's when Frank, the manager, intercepted her. "Emily, we need to talk," he said, his face stern. Emily's stomach dropped. She didn't know what was going on, but she knew it wasn't good. "What happened?" she asked, her voice betraying her concern. "Justin Bieber." "His table," Frank said, gesturing toward the dining area. "You're not supposed to interact with the guests like that. You can't go up to them and start a conversation out of the blue, especially with someone like him." Emily's pulse quickened. She opened her mouth to protest, but Frank cut her off. "Don't get me wrong. I understand you were trying to help, but you've got to be more careful. You can't go around acting like you're friends with the guy." He's a celebrity. The last thing we need is a scandal. Emily's mind whirled. Scandal? She hadn't done anything wrong. All she had done was help a person in need, and somehow, that had turned into something that could cost her the job she depended on. Frank, I didn't do anything, she tried to explain. I just helped him with the menu. He was flustered, and... I know, Frank interrupted, his tone softening slightly, but not enough. But listen. Justin is a walking headline. Everything he does, everything he says, gets turned into news. And right now, people are starting to talk. You need to lay low. Emily's mind raced. She had done nothing wrong, yet she was being reprimanded for helping someone who was struggling. She felt like she was losing control of the situation. Her job was on the line, and for what? Because she'd shown a little kindness. I didn't mean any harm, Emily muttered, feeling small. I know, Frank said, nodding. But it's not about what you meant. It's about how it looks. Emily couldn't understand. Why was everyone so concerned about appearances? Why couldn't people see that she had done something kind, something human? She was just trying to be a decent person in a world that often felt so indifferent. I'll be more careful, she said finally, her voice tight. Good, Frank replied. That's all I'm asking. Just stick to the basics. No more distractions. As Frank turned to walk away, Emily felt a pang of frustration. She had always prided herself on doing what was right, on helping others whenever she could. And now, because of one small act of kindness, she was being made to feel like she had done something wrong. The rest of the evening passed in a blur for Emily. She went through the motions of her shift, serving food, taking orders, and trying to avoid eye contact with the other staff members, who were clearly aware of the incident. Their whispers lingered in the air, even though they were trying to be discreet. The tension in the restaurant was palpable. But all Emily could think about was Justin. Was he really that disconnected from the world around him? Or was she just reading too much into the situation? Her heart ached for him, even though she barely knew him. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, something deeper than what anyone could see. When her shift finally ended, Emily was exhausted, both physically and emotionally. She gathered her things and left the restaurant, stepping out into the cool night air. As she walked toward her car, she couldn't help but glance up at the sky, wondering if maybe she had missed something important. Was there more to Justin than the headlines, the tabloids, the gossip? Could she have helped him in a way no one else could? She didn't know the answer, but as she drove home, she couldn't stop thinking about that one small moment, the moment when Justin Bieber had looked at her with something close to desperation in his eyes. Maybe he was just another famous face, but to Emily, he felt like so much more. The next morning, Emily woke up to a flurry of notifications on her phone. She rubbed her eyes and checked her messages, expecting to see the usual updates from her friends or family. But instead, the notifications were all about her. It didn't take long to realize that the video of Justin spilling his wine and Emily rushing to help him had gone viral. The video had been posted on social media, shared thousands of times, with headlines calling her the waitress who saved Justin Bieber's night. It seemed harmless at first, until Emily saw the comments. Some people were praising her for being kind, while others were criticizing her for trying to get attention from a celebrity. But the worst part? Frank had been right. The media had caught wind of it, and now the restaurant was being flooded with calls. Emily, get in here. We need to talk, Frank had said in his voicemail. Her stomach dropped as she realized that her small act of kindness had just escalated into something much bigger than she had ever imagined. What had started as an innocent gesture was now becoming a potential crisis. As Emily made her way back to the restaurant, she couldn't help but wonder if her life was about to change forever. And if so, would it be for better or worse? The moment Emily stepped into the Red Oak the next day, she could feel the tension in the air. It was thick, almost suffocating. The usual hum of the restaurant was drowned out by the soft whispers of the staff members and the rapid clicking of phones as people scrolled through the latest updates about Justin Bieber and the viral video. Her viral moment had quickly become the talk of the town. As she walked past the kitchen, a few of the servers shot her nervous glances. Emily couldn't help but feel a rush of heat flood her cheeks. She had never been one to seek attention, but now, it seemed to be chasing her down. She had no idea how to deal with this. She never imagined that helping a celebrity, someone like Justin Bieber, of all people, would bring so much chaos into her life. She made her way to the back office, where Frank had asked her to meet him. As she approached the door, she could hear his voice. He was talking to someone on the phone, his tone serious, and that only made her more anxious. She knocked lightly before entering, hoping for some answers. Frank looked up at her, his face expressionless. He motioned for her to sit. "Emily," he started, his voice stern. "You've seen the video, I'm sure." She nodded, biting her lip. "Yeah, I've seen it. It's everywhere." Frank leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping on the desk. "You've created a bit of a storm here, and it's not the kind we want. The video is all over social media, and people are blowing it out of proportion. It's starting to hurt the restaurant's image. I've been fielding calls all morning from reporters." Emily's stomach twisted into a knot. "What do you mean, hurt the restaurant's image? I didn't do anything wrong. I was just doing my job." "I know," Frank said, his tone softening just a touch. "But this is more than just serving a plate of food. This is Justin Bieber we're talking about. The minute you were seen with him, you became part of the story. People are already speculating. They think you're trying to use him for attention." Her heart sank. "But I wasn't. I was just helping him because he needed it." He looked. "I don't know, off. I just wanted to make sure he was okay." "I get it. But you're not seeing the bigger picture," Frank said, his voice growing firmer. "The media is treating this like you're some kind of savior, and it's causing a lot of distractions. People expect celebrities to be untouchable, and when someone like you gets involved, it changes the narrative. We don't want the restaurant to get dragged into any drama." Emily took a deep breath, trying to keep her emotions in check. "So what, I'm just supposed to pretend like I didn't help him? Just act like it didn't happen?" Frank shook his head. "No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that you need to be careful. The last thing we need is for this to escalate. We don't want any negative press, especially when it comes to celebrities like him. I need you to focus on your job and lay low for a while." Emily felt her chest tighten. This was all so unfair. She had only tried to help a person who seemed like he needed it. Was that such a crime? She wanted to argue, to tell Frank how ridiculous this all was, but she knew that wouldn't help. She needed this job. She couldn't afford to lose it over something so trivial. "I understand," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'll keep my distance." Frank nodded, but his eyes weren't kind. "Good. And Emily, just remember, people talk. You never know who might be watching." With that, he turned back to his phone, dismissing her with a gesture. Emily felt the sting of his words, but she didn't argue. She stood up and walked out of the office, her mind racing. How had everything gotten so complicated so quickly? As she returned to the floor, Emily tried to push the stress out of her mind and focus on her work. But it wasn't easy. Everywhere she turned, she overheard snippets of conversation about the video, the attention she had received, and Justin Bieber's involvement. It was hard to ignore, especially when her co-workers kept giving her sideways glances and muttering things under their breath. The day passed in a blur, and by the time her shift was over, Emily felt mentally and physically drained. She couldn't go back home and relax like she usually did after a long day. Her mind was buzzing with the consequences of her actions, even though she hadn't done anything wrong. As she walked out of the Red Oak, she checked her phone. The viral video was still everywhere, on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and even on the news. She could feel the weight of the world pressing down on her, but there was one message that stood out from all the others. From unknown number. Hey, it's Justin. I just wanted to say thanks for what you did last night. I know it wasn't the best situation, but I appreciated your kindness. You didn't have to do that. I hope we can talk soon. Emily froze, her thumb hovering over the message. She hadn't expected a message from him. After everything that had happened, she never imagined he'd reach out to her. But there it was. His name on the screen, the message confirming that he had noticed her, that he appreciated her. She stared at the message for a few moments, unsure of what to do. She had never imagined anything like this would happen. What was she supposed to say to Justin Bieber? What could she say? Before she could respond, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a call. She looked down at the screen. Frank. Her stomach dropped. Emily, Frank said, his voice tight. I need you to get back to the restaurant. There's been some news, and we have to handle it fast. Her mind spun. What could possibly happen now? Okay, I'll be right there, she said, trying to mask the panic in her voice. As she drove back to the restaurant, her heart pounded in her chest. She had no idea what Frank meant by news, but she had a feeling it wasn't going to be good. The night had only just begun, and already, her life was spiraling into uncharted territory. Emily barely had time to park her car before she was rushing into the Red Oak again. The minute she stepped through the door, she could see the chaos. It was a stark contrast to the usual calm atmosphere. The usual hum of the restaurant had been replaced by the clatter of hurried conversations and the sound of phones ringing off the hook. Staff members were scurrying around, clearly uneasy, and Frank was standing at the front, pacing back and forth. The moment he saw her, his face tightened. Emily, we need to talk. Now. Her stomach twisted in dread as she followed him into the back office. The door clicked shut behind them, and Emily was hit with a rush of anxiety. What could possibly be worse than the viral video and all the attention it was already getting? Frank didn't waste time. It's worse than we thought, he said, his voice low. The media picked up on your message from Justin Bieber. Emily froze. She had barely processed the fact that Justin had texted her when Frank's words hit her. Wait, what do you mean? My message wasn't public. He just sent me a text. Frank exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. It doesn't matter. It's already out there. Someone got a screenshot of your conversation, and now the tabloids are running with it. Emily's heart dropped into her stomach. No. This couldn't be happening. She had barely responded to Justin's message. How could this turn into another media storm? Are you telling me that now they're going to twist this into something else? Emily said, her voice trembling with a mix of disbelief and frustration. Frank nodded. Exactly. Some outlets are already speculating that you two are in contact, possibly even dating. They're saying that your little interaction at the restaurant was more than just friendly, and now they're digging deeper. Emily could hardly believe what she was hearing. That's insane, she muttered, her head spinning. How can they say that? I was just trying to help. I know, Frank said, his voice filled with sympathy. But the problem is, the media doesn't care about the truth. All they care about is the story. And right now, you're part of a very big story. Emily's mind raced. How had things gotten so out of control so quickly? Her intention had been so simple, to help someone who was clearly having a rough time. And now, because of one small act of kindness, her life was under a microscope. She sank into the chair in front of Frank's desk, her hands shaking. So what happens now? Do I lose my job? Do I need to quit? Frank's eyes softened, but his voice remained firm. I'm not going to lie to you, Emily. This could cause a lot of problems for the restaurant, especially if the press keeps picking up on this. I need you to understand that. But, he paused, choosing his next words carefully. But I'm not firing you. Not yet. Emily's heart skipped a beat. Not yet? Not yet, Frank repeated. But you need to lay low. No more talking to the press, no more social media posts, and definitely no more direct contact with Justin Bieber. This whole thing needs to blow over before we can make any decisions about what happens next. Emily nodded, still in shock. Okay. I'll do whatever it takes. I don't know how this happened. You're not the only one who's confused, Frank said. We've got the entire media circus on our hands now, and I need you to be part of the solution, not the problem. The weight of the situation pressed down on her like a heavy blanket. She wanted to scream, to shout, to tell the world that she hadn't done anything wrong. But the reality was clear, she couldn't fix this on her own. She had to follow Frank's advice if she didn't want to lose everything she had worked for. Frank stood up and walked to the door. I don't want to see you back here until this calms down. Take some time off. We'll figure this out, but right now, you need to get away from the spotlight. Emily didn't argue. She stood up, trying to steady her nerves. Okay. I'll stay out of the way. Good, Frank said, his voice softening. Go home. We'll keep you updated. As Emily walked out of the office, she felt a rush of emotions flooding over her. Anger. Frustration. Confusion. She hadn't asked for any of this. She had just tried to be a decent person, and now her life was being turned upside down. All she could think about was Justin. How had he gotten caught up in this too? Was he aware of the mess that had exploded because of that one fleeting moment? She didn't have any answers, and right now, there was no one she could turn to. The restaurant? They were in damage control mode. Her friends? They were either too far away or too wrapped up in their own lives to help her figure this out. The only person who might understand, who might even care, was Justin. But was she allowed to reach out to him? Was it even a good idea to get involved with someone whose life was so chaotic? The thought made her head spin. That night, as she lay in bed, Emily found herself staring at her phone. The world outside felt like it was moving on without her. Her inbox was flooded with messages from people who had seen the video and were now offering opinions. Some people had supportive words, but others were full of judgment. And still, there was nothing from Justin. She tried to focus on the task at hand, keeping her distance, laying low, as Frank had instructed, but something inside of her pushed back. She couldn't just pretend like none of this was real. This was her life. This was the result of her actions. And if there was any chance of things turning around, she needed to find a way to regain control. Her phone buzzed, pulling her out of her thoughts. The message notification was from an unknown number. Emily's breath caught in her throat as she glanced down at the screen. From Justin Bieber. Hey Emily, I'm really sorry for all the mess this has caused. I didn't think things would blow up like this, but I want you to know I'm here if you need anything. I didn't want you to be dragged into this. If you want to talk or anything, I'm just a text away. Emily stared at the message, unsure of what to feel. She had wanted to hear from him, but now that it was happening, it didn't feel as simple as she had imagined. She didn't know what to say. What could she say? How could she navigate this crazy mess that her life had become? The next few days felt like a whirlwind for Emily. Every time she opened her eyes, it was as if the chaos of the past week was spinning around her, threatening to pull her in every direction. The constant media coverage, the whispers at work, the buzzing of her phone with messages and social media notifications, it was all too much. It seemed that there was no escape. Still, the message from Justin lingered in her mind. She had read it several times, her thumb hovering over the screen, unsure of how to respond. She wanted to say something, anything, but she didn't know where to start. Was it appropriate to respond to him now? Was it too soon? Was this all just a temporary thing, a blip in his world that would soon be forgotten? She couldn't stop thinking about him, though. The kindness he had shown her the night at the restaurant, it felt genuine. But now, with all the media buzz, it was hard to tell what was real and what was just part of the story being spun around them. As the days passed, Emily did her best to stay out of the spotlight. She followed Frank's advice, stayed home when she wasn't working, and avoided any social media posts that could make the situation worse. But it wasn't enough. The tension was unbearable. When she wasn't working at the Red Oak, Emily found herself endlessly scrolling through news articles about the incident, as if somehow reading about it could make it all feel less real. The headlines were filled with dramatic statements and assumptions, each one trying to outdo the next in terms of sensationalism. Is Justin Bieber dating his waitress? The shocking connection between Justin Bieber and local heroine. It was all too much. Then, on the fourth day after receiving Justin's text, Emily got an unexpected phone call. Her heart skipped a beat when she saw the name flashing across the screen, Justin Bieber. She didn't know what to do. Should she answer? Was this a prank? But then she remembered his message, how sincere it had sounded. With a deep breath, she pressed accept and held the phone to her ear. Hey, Emily. It's Justin. His voice was calm, familiar, but there was a hint of unease in it. I know this is all crazy, and I'm really sorry for the mess. I didn't think it would blow up like this. Emily swallowed, her thoughts racing. I don't know what to say. It's been overwhelming, to be honest. I didn't expect any of this. I was just trying to help. I know, Justin replied. And I respect that. But it's not your fault that things got out of hand. You didn't ask for this, and I hate that you're in the middle of it. I don't want you to feel like you have to hide or like everything's your fault. Emily's heart softened at his words. There was something comforting about hearing his voice, especially now. I appreciate you saying that. I didn't know what to do, honestly. I still don't know how to handle all of this. I get it, Justin said, his voice warm but still carrying an undercurrent of worry. You've been dealing with the fallout, and that's unfair. Look, I don't want you to think that this whole thing was some publicity stunt or that I'm using you for attention. It wasn't like that. I never thought that, Emily replied quickly. I just wanted to make sure you were okay that night. I know. And I'll be forever grateful for that. Honestly, you helped me more than you'll ever know. But I don't want you to feel trapped in this whole circus. If you need to get away from everything, I can help. I can get you out of town for a bit, if you want some time to clear your head. The offer caught Emily off guard. A part of her was tempted to take him up on it. The idea of leaving this all behind, even for just a little while, was so appealing. But another part of her hesitated. She didn't know him well enough to take such a big step. And what if it only made things worse? I don't know, Justin, Emily said, unsure. I appreciate the offer, I do. But I have a lot to think about. I'm just trying to make sense of everything right now. I understand, Justin said, his tone sincere. I just want you to know you have options. If you ever feel like you need to talk or if you want to get away for a while, I've got you covered. Emily paused for a moment, her thoughts swirling. She didn't want to get swept up in the media storm. But at the same time, this might be her chance to take a step back, to regain control of her life. She'd never been one to run away from her problems, but maybe, just maybe, this was different. I'll think about it, she said finally, her voice quiet but determined. Thanks, Justin. For everything. I'll be here when you're ready, Justin replied. And remember, it's okay to not have all the answers right now. Just take care of yourself. They hung up, and Emily was left with a sense of calm that she hadn't felt in days. For the first time in what felt like forever, the world didn't seem quite so overwhelming. She didn't have to make any decisions right away. She could take her time. That evening, as Emily sat on her couch, her phone buzzed again. She picked it up, her stomach nodding as she saw that it was from Frank. From Frank. We need to talk. The media's getting worse. You need to decide what you want to do next. Emily groaned, staring at the message. The pressure was mounting, and now it seemed like the decisions were falling on her shoulders. Did she keep trying to keep her life normal, or did she let herself step away from everything, as Justin had suggested? She didn't know the answer, but the one thing she did know was that she couldn't let the pressure consume her. She needed time, space, and a plan. The next day was a strange blend of silence and tension. Emily woke up early, the weight of the past few days still heavy on her chest. She had barely slept, her mind racing between the constant noise of the media and the possibility of escaping it all, escaping to a quieter life, even if just for a short time. She spent the morning reading through some of the latest articles about her, each one more intrusive than the last. Headlines like, Justin Bieber's new friend, is she the one, and local waitress caught in a wild celebrity drama, swirled around in her head. It felt like her life was no longer her own, that every action she took was being watched, scrutinized, and twisted into something it wasn't. The idea of taking Justin's offer to leave town for a while was growing more appealing. A chance to get away from the chaos, breathe, and figure out what she wanted her next step to be. But then there was that gnawing feeling, the one that reminded her that running away wasn't always the solution. At noon, Emily received another text, but this time, it wasn't from Justin or Frank. It was from her best friend, Sarah. Hey, how are you holding up? I know things are crazy, but I'm here if you need to talk or get away for a bit. Let me know. Reading it, Emily couldn't help but feel a small sense of relief. Sarah had always been there for her, through thick and thin. It had been a while since they had spent time together, and now, more than ever, she needed that sense of normalcy. She quickly typed a reply. I'm hanging in there. A little overwhelmed, honestly. I might need to take you up on that offer for a getaway soon. Could really use a break. Sarah replied almost immediately. I'm all for it. Let's make it happen. No one deserves a break more than you right now. A small smile tugged at Emily's lips. It felt good to know that Sarah was on her side, that there was someone who understood. As Emily read Sarah's message over and over, she began to wonder if maybe this was the solution, taking a brief pause to regain her perspective, before deciding what came next. She didn't have to take Justin up on his offer, but perhaps getting away with Sarah could offer her the space to think things through. It was as if the universe had given her a sign, an opportunity to press pause on everything. Emily knew that the best thing she could do now was to take control of her own life again. That afternoon, Emily called Sarah and they made plans to meet up the following weekend for a road trip to a small cabin by the lake that Sarah had rented a few months ago. The idea of spending a few days in a peaceful, secluded place was exactly what Emily needed. She could disconnect, recharge, and hopefully gain some clarity. It wasn't the escape from the world she might have dreamed about, but it was a start. Emily hung up the phone and sat quietly in her living room, her fingers absently tracing the edge of the coffee table. She knew she wasn't going to get any answers right away. There were still a lot of questions, and still a lot of emotions to untangle. But for the first time in days, she felt like she could breathe again. Later that evening, Emily got a call from Frank. Her stomach clenched as she answered the phone. Emily, I just wanted to check in. How are you doing? Better, Emily said, the word coming out more genuine than she had expected. I've got a plan. I'm going to take a couple of days off with a friend. I think it'll give me some time to clear my head. Frank was quiet for a moment, and Emily could almost hear him thinking. I think that's a good idea, he said finally. Just make sure you're careful. The media is getting worse, and I don't want you to get caught in another storm while you're trying to lay low. I'll be careful, Emily promised. I just need a break, Frank. A little space. He sighed, a mix of concern and understanding in his voice. I get it. Just let me know if you need anything. After the call ended, Emily set the phone down and let out a slow breath. She had never been one to run away from problems, but at this moment, it felt like she was doing the right thing. She wasn't running from her responsibilities, she was just stepping back for a while to regain some sense of balance. It wasn't about forgetting everything that had happened, or pretending that it didn't matter. It was about finding a way to move forward with a clearer mind and a stronger sense of self. Over the next few days, Emily prepared for the trip with Sarah. She packed a few clothes, gathered some books, and made sure her phone was fully charged. She didn't want to be completely disconnected, she just needed to get away from the noise, even if only for a little while. On the day they left, the weather was perfect, clear skies, warm sunlight, and the promise of peace. As they drove through the countryside, Emily felt a weight lifting off her shoulders with each passing mile. Sarah chatted beside her, telling stories and cracking jokes, but Emily found herself drifting in and out of the conversation, her mind wandering to the events of the past week. The drive was long, but Emily didn't mind. She welcomed the quiet, the absence of the chaos she had been living in. For once, she didn't feel the need to keep up with everything happening in the outside world. All she wanted to do was exist in the moment, relax and not worry about what was coming next. When they arrived at the cabin, nestled in the woods beside a sparkling lake, Emily couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. It wasn't anything fancy, just a small wooden cabin with a porch overlooking the water, but it felt like the perfect sanctuary. The air smelled fresh, and the sounds of nature replaced the constant hum of traffic and city noise. That night, they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky with vibrant colors. It was simple, quiet, and beautiful. Emily felt her shoulders finally begin to relax, the constant tension in her chest starting to fade. "This is exactly what I needed," Emily said, her voice soft. "I'm glad," Sarah replied, her smile warm. "Sometimes we all just need a little time away from the world to find ourselves again." As they sat there, Emily realized Sarah was right. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she could take a step back and breathe without the pressure of everything happening around her. In that moment, she didn't have to think about the media, the viral video, or the potential for a life-changing decision. She could just be Emily. And that was enough. The days passed slowly, and Emily began to feel herself truly unwind. The pace of the cabin life, away from the constant buzz of social media and media reports, was exactly what she needed. With each sunrise, she felt her mind becoming clearer, the anxiety and pressure that had been choking her gradually lifting. She and Sarah spent the first few days hiking through the woods, taking in the beauty of nature, and laughing over silly memories from their childhood. It felt like nothing had changed, like they were back to the simpler times before everything had gotten so complicated. At night, they cooked dinner over an open fire, sitting together beneath a sky full of stars, and talked about everything, life, love, dreams, and even the strange turn Emily's life had taken since the night at the restaurant. But despite the peace and quiet, the reality of the world she had left behind still lingered in Emily's thoughts. Even though she tried to escape, she couldn't stop thinking about Justin and the choices that lay ahead. Was she ready to dive back into her old life? Could she live with the media frenzy and the constant attention? Would she ever feel like things were normal again? One afternoon, as Emily sat on the porch, reading a book Sarah had lent her, a sudden rustling noise from the woods caught her attention. She looked up and froze. A man was walking toward the cabin. His silhouette stood out against the forest backdrop, and Emily's heart skipped a beat. The man was tall, with dark hair and a steady, purposeful gait. As he got closer, her stomach flipped. It was Justin. He must have seen the shock on her face because he stopped a few feet away, looking slightly hesitant. "Hey, Emily," he said, his voice as warm and familiar as it had been on the phone. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything." Emily blinked, her mind struggling to process what was happening. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice betraying her confusion. I wasn't sure if you'd come up here," Justin replied, taking another step toward the porch. "But I wanted to check on you. I know you needed time to think, and I respect that. I just thought maybe we could talk." Her heart raced. She had spent so many hours over the last few days considering everything, thinking about Justin's offer and the strange, unexpected connection that had formed between them. And now, here he was, standing on the very porch she had been using as her escape. She tried to put him out of her mind, but seeing him here, in person, stirred emotions she had been trying to suppress. "I didn't expect to see you here," Emily said, still trying to wrap her head around his unexpected appearance. "I thought you were busy, with everything going on." Justin smiled softly, but there was a hint of guilt in his eyes. "I'm always busy, Emily," he said. "But I wanted to make sure you're okay. After everything. I just wanted to see you, to make sure you're not getting overwhelmed." She looked away, trying to collect her thoughts. Her mind was whirling with questions, but all she could do was focus on the fact that Justin had traveled all this way to find her. What did it mean? Was this just another twist in her life that she hadn't seen coming? "I'm doing fine," Emily said, her voice steady but guarded. "I needed this time to think, to get away from everything. I just needed to be by myself for a little while." There was a pause before Justin spoke again, his voice a little more serious. "I understand. But I don't want you to feel like you're alone in all of this. I know it's been hard, and I never meant for it to get to this point. The last thing I want is for you to feel like I'm adding to the pressure." Emily shook her head, feeling a mixture of frustration and confusion. She had spent so much time trying to figure out what she wanted, but now, with Justin standing here, everything felt more complicated. She had wanted space, but she had also wanted answers. She had wanted to be left alone, but she also didn't want to lose the connection that had sparked between them. "Why are you here, Justin?" Emily finally asked, her voice quieter than she intended. "Is this about what happened? Or is it about something else?" Justin's expression softened, and he took a step closer, though still keeping a respectful distance. "It's about both, Emily," he said, his eyes sincere. "I can't pretend like nothing happened that night. And I can't pretend that it didn't affect me. But I also want you to know that this isn't about using you for some publicity stunt, or anything like that. I respect you, and I don't want you to feel like you've been dragged into something you didn't ask for." The sincerity in his words caught Emily off guard. She had heard the rumors, seen the headlines, and felt the weight of the media's assumptions about her. But now, standing face to face with Justin, she realized just how different the reality of the situation was. "I didn't ask for any of this," Emily said, her voice thick with emotion. "I didn't ask for this attention, and I didn't ask for any of the drama. I just wanted to help that night, and now I feel like I'm stuck in a story that isn't even mine." Justin nodded, his gaze unwavering. "I know. And I'm sorry for that. But if you ever want to talk, or if you need something, anything, I'm here. I meant what I said when I offered you the chance to get away. I just want you to know that you don't have to go through this alone." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them was thick with unspoken thoughts, and Emily felt a deep, inexplicable pull toward Justin. There was something about the way he looked at her, as if he truly understood her pain and the complexity of what she was going through. Finally, Emily broke the silence. "I appreciate everything you're doing, Justin. I really do. But I need some time. I need to figure out what I want without feeling like I have to make a decision right now." Justin smiled, a little relieved. "I get it. Take all the time you need. But just remember, I'm here if you need anything." As he turned to leave, Emily's heart thudded in her chest. She wasn't sure what the future held, or whether she could continue to walk the path she was on without things becoming even more complicated. But for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel quite as alone. Justin's unexpected visit had thrown her off balance, but it had also opened her eyes to something else, the possibility that there was more to this story than the headlines had let on. The next few days passed slowly, but the peaceful atmosphere of the cabin was now tainted with a sense of anticipation. Emily found herself oscillating between moments of calm and moments of dread. Justin's unexpected visit had left her with more questions than answers, and every time she thought about it, her mind spiraled in different directions. It wasn't just the attention from the media, it was everything that had come with it. The pressure was beginning to feel unbearable. Her time away with Sarah was supposed to be a break from the madness, but even here, the whispers of her encounter with Justin followed her. Emily could almost feel the weight of the world pressing down on her shoulders. She would read news articles from her phone, or check the social media posts that tagged her, and she couldn't help but feel the overwhelming sensation of being trapped. Every move she made was scrutinized, even when she wasn't in the public eye. One afternoon, while Sarah was out exploring the nearby woods, Emily decided to take a walk by the lake. She needed the space to clear her mind, to think in solitude. The cool air brushed against her face as she sat down by the water, watching the ripples spread out in soft concentric circles. The quiet of the lake was soothing, but it didn't erase the gnawing feeling of uncertainty inside her. What was she supposed to do now? The sound of footsteps behind her snapped her out of her thoughts. She turned quickly, her heart skipping a beat. To her surprise, standing a few feet away was none other than Frank. "Frank?" Emily asked, her voice shaky. She hadn't expected to see him here, and his appearance sent a ripple of unease through her. "Hey, Frank said, walking closer with a hesitant look in his eyes. "I know you needed time to think, but I thought I'd check on you. I didn't realize you'd come out this far." Emily stood up, brushing the dirt off her jeans. "What are you doing here? How did you even know I was up here?" Frank paused, a moment of discomfort passing over his face. "Justin called me. He said you were here, and he stopped, unsure of how to continue." "You talked to Justin?" Emily interrupted, her voice tight. "What's going on? Why is everyone suddenly so involved in my life?" Frank's face softened, a combination of concern and guilt etched in his features. "I'm sorry, I just wanted to make sure you're okay. This whole thing, it's a lot. I can't even imagine how overwhelming it must be for you right now." Emily felt her pulse quicken. "Overwhelming doesn't even begin to cover it, Frank. Everyone is watching me, judging me, and now I have Justin, popping up out of nowhere. I don't know what I'm supposed to do anymore." Frank walked closer, standing beside her, though still keeping some distance. "I know it's been hard. But I'm here for you. You don't have to do this alone." She glanced over at him, her mind filled with a mix of frustration and confusion. "I just wanted a normal life. All I ever wanted was a simple job, a normal day. And now, everything's turned upside down. I don't know who to trust anymore." Frank's face fell, and he gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "You can trust me, Emily. You know that." Her breath caught in her throat, but she pulled away before the emotions could overwhelm her. "I don't know what I want, Frank. Everything is moving so fast. Justin, he's being nice, but I can't tell if he's just doing this out of guilt or because he actually cares. And you've been here for me, but I don't know what any of this means anymore." Frank nodded slowly, clearly trying to process her words. "You don't have to have all the answers right now. But what I do know is that you deserve to feel safe, Emily. You deserve to have a life that's your own. And if you want to take a step back from everything, just say the word. We'll figure it out together." Emily swallowed, her chest tight with emotion. She wanted to believe that everything could go back to how it was before. But deep down, she knew that wasn't possible. She was no longer just Emily, the waitress at a small diner. She was now a part of a larger narrative, and that narrative wasn't hers to control. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't escape the headlines, the rumors, and the expectations that were placed on her. "I just need some time to think, Frank," she said quietly, looking out at the lake. "I appreciate you being here, but I think I need to figure things out on my own for a while." There was a long silence between them, as Frank absorbed her words. Finally, he nodded. "I get it. But I'm here whenever you need me, okay?" "Okay," she whispered, trying to offer a small smile, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Thanks, Frank." As Frank turned to leave, Emily's mind continued to spin. She wanted to believe that the pressure would eventually subside, that things would return to normal once the storm passed. But deep down, she knew better. The storm wasn't going to pass anytime soon. It had already become a part of her life, something that she couldn't just ignore or walk away from. For the rest of the afternoon, Emily stayed by the lake, alone with her thoughts. She felt like she was standing at a crossroads, unsure of which direction to take. There was a part of her that wanted to return to her old life, to go back to the safety of her routine. But another part of her couldn't shake the pull of something greater. There were doors opening in her life, doors that could lead her to a world she had never imagined, but that came with a price. As the sun began to set, casting a warm golden hue over the lake, Emily felt a sense of clarity begin to take shape. She wasn't ready to make any decisions yet, but she knew she couldn't keep running from the reality of her situation. The world was changing around her, and whether she liked it or not, she had to face what was coming next. And maybe, just maybe, Justin's offer wasn't just a way out. Maybe it was a chance to redefine who she was and take control of the narrative for the first time in her life. But one thing was certain, whatever path she chose, she couldn't go back to the way things were. The next few days felt like a blur, the passage of time disorienting and rapid. Emily spent most of her time at the cabin alone. The stillness of nature around her seemed to mock her confusion, as though the trees and the lake were watching her, waiting for her to decide what her next move would be. She had tried to put the pressure of her situation out of her mind, to focus on the simplicity of her surroundings. But no matter how hard she tried, her thoughts kept circling back to Justin, the media, and the whirlwind that had completely upended her life. The peace she had hoped to find in the wilderness was elusive. As much as she had wanted to stay away from the drama, the fact remained, she couldn't simply erase the events of that night from her mind. No matter how many times she tried to convince herself she didn't care about the attention, the truth was that it was impossible to ignore. The headlines kept coming, and the rumors kept circulating. People were talking about her. It was overwhelming, suffocating even. One morning, as she sat on the porch, sipping her coffee and staring out at the lake, Emily's phone buzzed in her pocket. She hesitated for a moment, not wanting to look. But the feeling of curiosity tugged at her, and she pulled the phone out, her breath catching when she saw the message. It was from Justin. "Justin, I know you're probably still thinking about everything. If you feel like talking, I'm here. I can come to you, or we can talk on the phone. Just let me know." Emily stared at the message for a long moment, her mind racing. She hadn't replied to Justin's messages since his surprise visit, unsure of what to say. But now, seeing his message, something inside her shifted. Maybe it was the fact that she hadn't spoken to anyone in days, or maybe it was the realization that the unresolved tension between them was gnawing at her. She thought for a moment, her fingers hovering over the keyboard as she debated whether to reply. But then, she knew she couldn't put it off any longer. "Emily, I've been thinking a lot. Maybe we can talk. But not over the phone. I'm up here at the cabin by myself. If you want to come by, we can talk in person." The words felt heavier than she expected. The offer seemed so simple, just a conversation. But deep down, Emily knew it wasn't just about talking anymore. There were things that needed to be said, things she had been avoiding. And perhaps, if they were going to move forward, it was time to face the truth. She hit send and sat back in her chair, staring out over the lake. The cool breeze ruffled her hair, and she found herself suddenly anxious, wondering what Justin would say. Would he take her up on her offer? Would their conversation clear the air or make things even more complicated? It wasn't long before Justin replied. "Justin, I'll be there in a couple of hours. Get ready. I think we both need this conversation." Emily felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She wasn't sure if she was ready for the intensity of this conversation, but she knew it was inevitable. She took a deep breath, trying to calm her nerves, and decided to prepare herself mentally for what was to come. This wasn't just about clearing the air. It was about understanding where they stood, where she stood, and whether there was a way forward that didn't feel like a trap. The hours passed slowly as she waited. When the sound of a car pulling into the driveway finally broke the silence, Emily's heart skipped a beat. She rose from her chair and walked to the door, her hands trembling slightly. There he was, stepping out of the car, his posture tense yet familiar. Justin's presence always had a way of commanding attention, even in the quietest of places. He looked around at the peaceful surroundings and then locked eyes with Emily, his expression unreadable. "Hey," Justin said, his voice calm but carrying an undertone of uncertainty. "Thanks for inviting me up here." Emily nodded, trying to steady herself. "I wasn't sure if you'd come. But I think it's time we talk." He stepped closer, his eyes softening. "I've been waiting for this conversation, Emily. I didn't want to push you, but I felt like you needed time to figure things out." "I appreciate that," Emily said quietly, stepping back as she gestured for him to follow her inside. "But I can't keep running from this. The truth is, I don't know what I'm doing anymore. And I can't figure this out alone." Justin paused, his gaze lingering on her for a moment before he nodded. "You're not alone in this, Emily. You never were. I just didn't know how to make that clear without it looking like I was trying to manipulate the situation." They both entered the cabin and took a seat at the small wooden table. For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of the wind outside and the distant call of birds. It was as if the world had come to a standstill, waiting for the next words to break the silence. Finally, Emily spoke, her voice soft but firm. "I don't want to be a part of some circus, Justin. I don't want my life to be out there for everyone to judge, to make me into a story. But at the same time, I'm not sure what's real anymore. What's between us? Is it real? Or is this just another distraction?" Justin's eyes narrowed slightly, and he leaned forward, his voice steady. "I can't speak for the world, but I can speak for myself. And what I feel for you, what I've felt since that night, has been real. It wasn't about the headlines or the attention. It was about you. It's always been about you." Emily swallowed, unsure of what to say. She had been afraid of the possibility that Justin might be saying what he thought she wanted to hear, just to avoid the uncomfortable truth. But something about his words, something about the way he looked at her, made her believe him. "I don't know where this is going, Justin," she admitted. "I don't even know where I'm going. But I'm not running anymore. I'm not pretending like everything's fine when it's not. I want to figure this out, whatever it is." There was a pause as Justin seemed to absorb her words, his expression softening. "And I'm here for that, Emily. Whatever you need." The weight of the conversation hung between them, but for the first time in a long while, Emily felt like she was finally speaking the truth, her truth. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't clear. But it was real. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to move forward. The quiet that followed felt heavy, almost suffocating. Emily and Justin sat across from each other at the small cabin table, their eyes locked, but neither seemed ready to move just yet. The world outside felt distant, a stark contrast to the tension that had built up in the room. Emily could feel the storm within her, a mixture of uncertainty, fear, and the faintest glimmer of hope. It had been a long time since she had opened up to anyone this much, and the vulnerability left her feeling exposed. She wasn't sure where this conversation was headed, but it was clear that this moment, this exchange of raw truth, was pivotal. Justin was the first to break the silence. His voice was low, almost tentative, as if testing the waters. "You know, I never meant for things to get this complicated. When I met you that night, everything felt so effortless. You made me feel like I could just be myself. That was a rarity for me. But once everything blew up, I realized how quickly things could spiral out of control." Emily nodded slowly, her eyes downcast. "I get it. I really do. I thought I could handle it, but the pressure is just, it's too much sometimes. It's like every time I think I'm starting to breathe again, something happens to pull me back into the chaos." Justin shifted in his seat, his gaze softening. "I'm sorry, Emily. I never wanted to be the cause of that. I thought I could help, maybe ease some of the pressure, but I didn't realize how overwhelming it would be for you." There was a sincerity in his voice that took Emily by surprise. She had always thought of Justin as a celebrity, someone surrounded by a world of his own, far removed from the struggles of regular people. But now, hearing him speak so openly, she saw a different side of him. He wasn't just the famous singer, he was a person who cared, who had his own battles, his own vulnerabilities. "It's not just you, Justin," she said softly. "It's everything. The media, the fans, the constant need to explain myself to everyone. It's like I'm losing myself in the process. I don't even know who I am in all of this anymore." There was a pause as Justin processed her words, his expression thoughtful. Finally, he leaned forward slightly, his voice quiet but firm. "I can't tell you how to handle any of this. But what I can tell you is that you don't have to face it alone. I'm here for you, no matter what. You don't need to have all the answers right now. You just need to take it one day at a time." Emily looked at him, her chest tightening as a lump formed in her throat. She hadn't realized how much she needed to hear those words. It was as if a small piece of the weight she had been carrying began to lift, if only just a little. "I appreciate that," she whispered. "I really do." Justin's eyes softened, and for a moment, it felt like the rest of the world faded away. There was no media, no pressure, no expectations. There was just this moment, just the two of them, sharing an unspoken understanding. But even with the comfort of his words, Emily couldn't help but feel the weight of what lay ahead. The path forward was uncertain, and she wasn't sure if it would ever be as simple as they both wanted it to be. "I think about you a lot, Emily," Justin said suddenly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not just as the waitress from that diner, but as someone who made me see things differently. Someone who didn't want anything from me. I don't know if you can understand how rare that is in my life." Emily's heart skipped a beat. She had known, deep down, that Justin cared. But hearing him say it out loud, hearing him admit that she had made a difference in his life, was both humbling and overwhelming. For so long, she had seen herself as ordinary, just another person in the background of a world full of people who mattered more. But now, Justin's words made her feel like she was someone worth noticing. Like she mattered. "You're not just someone, Justin," she said quietly. You're a person who means something to a lot of people. But that doesn't mean your life has to be a performance. You're allowed to be real, too." He gave a small, almost imperceptible smile, as if her words had reached him in a way he hadn't expected. "I guess that's what I'm still trying to figure out. How to balance being real with all the noise. And I want to help you find that balance too, Emily. I don't want to add to your stress. I just want to be there for you, however you need me." For the first time in days, Emily felt a sense of peace wash over her. The world wasn't perfect, and there was still so much she had to figure out, but for that brief moment, she wasn't alone. There was someone who understood, someone who wanted to help her navigate the chaos. "Thank you, Justin," she said softly. "I don't know what's going to happen next, but I appreciate you being here." Justin reached across the table, his hand hovering for a moment before he gently placed it over hers. The simple touch felt like an anchor in the storm that had become her life. "Whatever happens next, we'll figure it out together." Emily felt her heart race, her mind trying to process the weight of his words. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was no longer drifting aimlessly. There was a direction now, a possibility of finding peace amidst the turmoil. She had a long road ahead, and she still wasn't sure where it would take her, but at least now, she wasn't walking it alone. For the first time in a long while, Emily felt like she was ready to face what came next. The truth wasn't always clear, and the path forward would undoubtedly be challenging, but with Justin's words and his support, maybe it wouldn't feel so impossible after all. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The days following their conversation were different. Though Emily didn't know how to explain it, something had shifted between her and Justin. It wasn't necessarily a dramatic change, but it was enough to make her feel a sense of connection that had been missing before. For the first time, she didn't feel like she was trapped in a whirlwind of expectations, rumors, and external pressures. She could breathe. But as the days passed, Emily realized that while the immediate pressure had eased, there was still a larger question looming over her head: what would happen if the world found out she was still in touch with Justin Bieber? What did that mean for her life? Her phone buzzed one afternoon, interrupting her thoughts. She didn't even need to check the number, she knew it was Justin. He had been reaching out more frequently, making sure she was okay, asking if she needed anything, or just offering words of encouragement. "Justin, hey, I know we talked about moving forward, but I need to tell you something. There's more to all of this than just what happened that night. We need to talk again. In person. It's important." Emily's stomach tightened. She couldn't quite explain why, but the sudden shift in tone made her uneasy. Their last conversation had been meaningful and honest, so why would he need to talk again? What was he keeping from her? "Emily, okay. I'll be at the cabin. Come by when you're ready." The message was short and to the point, but it felt like the beginning of something big, something she wasn't sure she was ready to face. She tossed her phone on the couch and stood by the window, watching the trees sway in the wind. The air was heavy with the smell of pine, the scent that had become a comforting constant for her. Yet, now, even the calmness of the forest couldn't chase away the sense of foreboding that had settled in her chest. A few hours later, Justin's car pulled up to the cabin. Emily's pulse quickened. She opened the door before he could knock, almost as if she were bracing herself. Justin stepped inside, his usual calm demeanor replaced with an unfamiliar tension. He didn't look directly at her at first, his eyes focused on the floor, like he was unsure how to begin. "Hi," he said softly, looking up finally. His eyes weren't full of the confidence she had seen in the past. There was something raw, something vulnerable about him now. "Hi," Emily replied, her voice steady but cautious. "What's going on, Justin? What's this all about?" He ran a hand through his hair, clearly unsure how to begin. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said before, about not being able to handle all the pressure. And I've been thinking about me, about what I've brought into your life." Emily's heart sank. Was he about to tell her he regretted everything? That this was all a mistake? "I never wanted to add to your stress," he continued, his voice lowering. "But there's something I need to tell you. Something you don't know about me, about everything that's been going on with us." Emily tilted her head, waiting for him to continue. "What is it?" Justin took a deep breath, his gaze fixed on her. "I wasn't completely honest with you before. About my intentions, about everything. When we first met, it wasn't just because I wanted to get to know you or have a normal conversation. I was struggling, Emily. There were things happening in my life that I didn't want anyone to know about. Emily's brow furrowed in confusion. What do you mean? What was going on? Justin hesitated, clearly wrestling with the words. Finally, he spoke, his voice quiet but steady. I've been in therapy for a while now. Dealing with some things, stuff that's been affecting me for years. The pressure of fame. The constant scrutiny. The loneliness that comes with it all. I thought I could handle it, but I couldn't. And when I met you, I was at a breaking point. I thought maybe I could find a way to escape, to be someone else for a while, someone who wasn't followed by cameras and fans. You made me feel like I could be human again. The revelation hit Emily like a ton of bricks. She had never imagined that Justin, the person who seemed so untouchable, could be struggling in such a deep way. The layers of his public persona had always kept her at arm's length. She had seen the glamorous side of his life, the concerts, the headlines, the adoration of millions. But now, she was seeing a side of him she had never anticipated, vulnerable, raw, and deeply conflicted. So, you were using me? Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She didn't mean for the words to sound as harsh as they did, but the truth was, she felt hurt. All this time, she had believed that what they shared had been real, that it was based on something more than just the desire to escape. No, not at all, Justin quickly responded, his voice frantic now. It wasn't about using you. It was about needing something real. You were a person I could talk to. You didn't want anything from me, and that was such a relief. But I didn't know how to explain that to you. I thought if I didn't say anything, maybe I could just enjoy the moment, enjoy our time together. Emily crossed her arms, her mind swirling. This was so much more than she had bargained for. But why didn't you tell me this sooner, Justin? Why let everything spiral out of control? I didn't want to drag you into it, he confessed, his voice soft now. I thought I could keep it all together. But the truth is, I wasn't being honest with myself either. I didn't know what I wanted. I still don't, if I'm being honest. Emily felt a mixture of emotions swirl inside her. Anger, betrayal, confusion, and sadness, all of it intermingled, and yet, underneath it all, there was something else. Something that kept her from walking away, something that kept her tethered to him despite everything. I wish you had been more honest with me, she said finally, her voice quiet but firm. I get it, Justin. I do. But the way you kept everything hidden, it's hard to understand. I feel like I've been dragged into a world I didn't ask for. Justin nodded slowly, his eyes filled with regret. I know. And I'm sorry. I wish I could have done things differently. But what I'm trying to say now is that I don't want to make any more mistakes. I want to be open with you, Emily. I want to try and figure things out. But I need to know if you're willing to try with me. For a long moment, Emily didn't say anything. She stared at him, weighing his words, trying to make sense of everything. Was this the truth? Could she trust him again after everything that had happened? Finally, she took a deep breath, her decision hanging in the air. I don't know if I can trust you, Justin. But I'm willing to give it a try. Because I think we both need to find our way out of the mess we're in. The cabin felt quieter than ever before. Emily sat on the couch, her legs tucked under her, staring out the window at the distant mountains. The world outside seemed far away, almost unreal, as if it existed in a different time zone altogether. She could feel the weight of Justin's confession pressing down on her, and for the first time in a long while, she wasn't sure what to do with all the emotions swirling inside her. The uncertainty gnawed at her, like a constant ache that refused to be ignored. Justin had left just hours earlier, his departure leaving a hollow silence in the cabin. He had promised to give her space, but she couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing on the edge of something much bigger than either of them anticipated. His vulnerability had opened a door, but Emily wasn't sure she was ready to walk through it. Her mind kept replaying their conversation, and with each repetition, the questions grew more intense. How could she trust him again? Was it possible to move forward with someone who had kept so much from her? And most importantly, could she truly handle the weight of a relationship with someone as complicated as Justin Bieber? The phone buzzed again, dragging Emily out of her thoughts. She didn't even need to look at the screen to know who it was. Justin had been texting more frequently, checking in with her, asking how she was doing. She had appreciated the effort, but now, she wasn't sure how to respond. Justin, I know we're both processing a lot right now, but I just want you to know that I'm here. Whenever you're ready to talk again, I'll be here. Take all the time you need. His words were kind, sincere even, but they felt heavy. There was an underlying desperation in them that she couldn't ignore. Was this a genuine desire to support her, or was it his way of holding on to something he wasn't ready to let go of? Emily stared at the message, her finger hovering over the screen. For a moment, she thought about typing back, telling him how confused she was, how uncertain she felt about everything. But then, she hesitated. Wasn't that the problem? She had been too uncertain for too long. She needed to make a choice, even if it scared her. Emily, I'm thinking, Justin. I need some time to figure things out. I'm just overwhelmed right now. It was a simple reply, but it felt like the only honest thing she could say. She wasn't ready to make a decision, not yet. And maybe, just maybe, that was okay. She tossed her phone back onto the couch and stood up, pacing across the room. The walls felt like they were closing in on her, the uncertainty of her situation thickening the air. She wanted to scream, to release all the tension building inside her, but she couldn't. Not yet. Then, as if by instinct, she found herself walking toward the small bookshelf in the corner of the room. Her fingers grazed the spines of the books, and she pulled one out at random. It was an old novel she had read years ago, one that had always brought her comfort. She sat down on the couch, opening the book to a random page, as if the familiar words could ground her in the chaos. She closed the book with a sigh and glanced out the window once more. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden hue over the landscape. It was beautiful, serene. But the calmness only made her questions feel more intense. She couldn't escape this. The decision was hers to make, and she had to face it. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts, and her heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected anyone, especially not Justin, so soon after their last conversation. But when she opened the door, it wasn't Justin standing there. Instead, it was her best friend, Sarah, her face full of concern. "Hey," Sarah said softly, stepping into the cabin. "I thought I'd stop by, see how you're doing. You haven't been answering my calls. What's going on?" Emily smiled weakly, gesturing for Sarah to sit. "It's been a lot," she admitted, sitting down across from her friend. "I don't even know where to start." Sarah didn't hesitate. "Start with the basics. What's going on?" "I've been seeing the headlines, Emily. Are you okay?" Emily rubbed her temples, trying to organize her thoughts. "I don't know if I am. Justin and we've been talking a lot, and I think things are starting to make sense. But I'm also really scared. I don't know if I can trust him. He's been so open with me lately, but I'm not sure if it's enough. There's still so much I don't know." Sarah took a deep breath, leaning forward, her expression serious. "Listen, I get it. I know it's been a whirlwind for you, and I can't even imagine the pressure you're under. But you have to ask yourself one thing: do you feel like you can trust him? Do you feel like you want to try?" Emily hesitated, her heart pounding in her chest. Could she? Could she really let go of the fear and give herself a chance at something real, even if it came with all the complications? I don't know, Emily said softly, her voice cracking. I want to, but I'm scared. I don't want to lose myself in all of this. Sarah reached across the table, placing a hand over Emily's. You don't have to lose yourself, Em. You just have to trust yourself. No one else can make this decision for you. You know what's best for you. Emily nodded slowly, feeling the weight of her friend's words sink in. She had always prided herself on being strong, on being able to handle whatever came her way. But now, for the first time in a long time, she didn't have the answers. And maybe that was okay. Maybe she didn't need to have it all figured out just yet. Thank you, Sarah, Emily whispered, grateful for the support. I just need to take a step back and breathe. I'll figure it out. Take all the time you need, Sarah said with a smile, standing up. But just remember, whatever you decide, I've got your back. As Sarah left, Emily felt a renewed sense of clarity. She didn't have all the answers, but for the first time, she felt like she was on the right path. The decision was still hers to make, but maybe, just maybe, she could trust herself to figure it out. The days after Sarah's visit were filled with quiet reflection. Emily had spent a lot of time thinking, weighing her options, and trying to figure out where she stood with Justin. She had even gone back to the cabin a few times, sitting by the lake, letting the sound of the water calm her chaotic mind. Yet, despite the peace that nature seemed to offer, there was a storm inside her, one that wouldn't settle until she made a choice. It was one of those early mornings when Emily felt the fog of indecision begin to lift. The sky was clear, the sun just beginning to rise, casting long shadows across the forest floor. She sat on the porch of the cabin, a warm mug of coffee in her hands, staring out at the landscape. The world felt still and distant, and for a brief moment, she felt like she could actually breathe again. But the questions were still there, gnawing at her. Was she ready to take that next step with Justin? Or was she better off walking away, protecting herself from more heartbreak? Her phone buzzed again, and she hesitated for only a moment before picking it up. She already knew who it was. Justin, hey, I've been thinking about you. I know things have been crazy, and I don't want to pressure you, but I wanted to see if you were ready to talk. Just let me know. His words were simple enough, but there was a sense of vulnerability in them that she couldn't ignore. The tension between them had grown since their last conversation, and it was clear that Justin was struggling too. He wanted to move forward, but there was still so much hanging in the balance. She stared at the message for a long moment, feeling the weight of it settle into her chest. She couldn't keep avoiding him. She couldn't keep running from this. Justin had made his intentions clear. He wanted to rebuild, to try again. But the real question was, did she want to try with him? Emily, I think it's time we talk. I'll meet you at the cabin this afternoon. Let's see where we're at. As soon as the message was sent, Emily felt a small sense of relief. It was a step forward, a decision made. She wasn't sure what would come out of their conversation, but for the first time in a long while, she wasn't running from the uncertainty. She was ready to face it head-on. The rest of the morning passed slowly. Emily tried to distract herself by working on some of her personal projects, but her mind kept wandering back to the upcoming meeting with Justin. What would they say to each other? How would they bridge the gap between their past mistakes and their present feelings? And most importantly, would it be enough to rebuild what they once had? Around noon, Emily made her way to the cabin, the familiar drive giving her time to sort through her thoughts. She had already decided that she wasn't going to make any rash decisions. She would listen to Justin, hear him out, and then make her own choice. But deep down, she knew that the outcome of this meeting would shape the rest of her life, for better or worse. When she arrived, Justin was already waiting on the porch, looking just as apprehensive as she felt. He stood up when he saw her, a small but nervous smile on his face. Hey, he greeted her softly, his hands in his pockets. Thanks for coming. Emily nodded, her gaze meeting his. I didn't want to keep avoiding this, Justin. We need to talk. They walked inside, sitting down at the small kitchen table. The tension between them was palpable, like the air before a storm. Neither of them spoke for a moment, both unsure of how to begin. Finally, Justin cleared his throat and broke the silence. I know I've asked a lot from you, and I know I've made mistakes. But I want to do better. For both of us. Emily looked at him, studying his face, trying to find some sign of the sincerity he had shown her the last time they spoke. There was something different about him now, less guarded, more open, but the uncertainty in her heart remained. I'm not asking for you to forgive me right away, Justin continued, his voice steady but full of emotion. I just want you to know that I'm here. And I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make things right. But I need to know if you're willing to give me a chance. Emily's chest tightened at his words. She had thought long and hard about this moment. She knew what it meant to take a risk, to open herself up to someone again after everything that had happened. But she also knew that without taking that leap, she would always wonder what might have been. I don't know if I can give you all the answers you're looking for, Justin, Emily said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. But I'm willing to try. I'm willing to see if we can make this work, if you're really ready to be open and honest with me. Justin's eyes softened, his relief visible. I am. I promise you, I am. The air between them shifted, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Emily felt a glimmer of hope. There was still so much to work through, but she wasn't ready to give up just yet. She didn't have all the answers, but maybe that was okay. Maybe this was the beginning of something new, something that could change both of their lives. I need time, Emily said, more to herself than to Justin. I need time to trust you again. But I'll try. We'll try. Justin nodded, his eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and hope. That's all I can ask for. And I'll give you all the time you need. I'll be patient. Emily stood up, walking over to the window. She needed a moment to herself, a moment to breathe and take in the gravity of the decision she had just made. The world outside was still, quiet, almost as if the universe was waiting for her to make her move. When she turned back to Justin, she saw him standing there, his gaze locked on her with an intensity that was both comforting and overwhelming. I'm here, Emily, he said, his voice low and steady. And I'm not going anywhere. And for the first time in a long time, Emily believed him. The weeks that followed were filled with small but significant changes. Emily and Justin, though still navigating the uncertainties of their past, began to carve out a new rhythm. It was delicate at first, a series of hesitant conversations, tentative gestures, and moments of silence. But amidst it all, there was something undeniably different. There was space for hope now, where before, there had been only doubt. Emily found herself more and more drawn to the simplicity of their time together. Justin had kept his promise, he was patient. He didn't rush her, didn't try to force things. Instead, he allowed their relationship to unfold in its own time, one step at a time. And in return, Emily started to open up, slowly but surely. It wasn't that the past had disappeared. There were still moments of tension, moments when the weight of old wounds would surface unexpectedly. But each time, they faced it together, confronting the hard truths and doing their best to move forward. One evening, after a long day of work, Emily found herself sitting on the couch in the cabin, sipping on tea. The cabin felt cozier now, more like a home, a place where she could find peace in the midst of everything going on in her life. Justin entered the room, a gentle smile on his face. I thought I'd give you a little space tonight. But I also thought you could use some company, he said, his voice light, trying to keep things casual. Emily glanced up at him and smiled back. There was a sense of ease between them now, something that had been missing when they first met. She nodded toward the chair across from her. Come sit. I could use the company. He made his way over and sat down, a comfortable distance between them. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. In fact, it was nice, just two people sharing the same space, no pressure, no expectations. "How was your day?" Emily asked, trying to start a conversation, though she wasn't sure where to begin. "It was good," Justin replied. "Busy, but good. I'm still working on some new music, so there's always a lot going on behind the scenes. But honestly, it's been easier to focus lately. I think having time with you has helped." Emily met his gaze, surprised by the sincerity in his words. "You're really trying, aren't you?" "I am," he said quietly, his expression soft. "I know I've let you down in the past, and I know it's going to take time to rebuild what we had. But I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I just need you to know that." She nodded, the weight of his words settling in her chest. It was hard to imagine that they were both standing on the same ground now, after everything that had happened. But the more time she spent with him, the more she realized that maybe, just maybe, there was something worth saving here. "It's not easy," Emily said after a pause, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't think I've fully forgiven myself for letting it get to this point. I feel like I should have known better, like I should have seen it coming." Justin's eyes softened, and he leaned forward, his voice gentle. "It's not your fault, Emily. I was the one who made the mistakes. You didn't deserve any of that." "But I allowed it," she said, shaking her head slightly. "I allowed myself to get so lost in it all. I didn't see it for what it was, and that's on me." Justin reached out, taking her hand in his. His touch was warm, comforting, and it grounded her in the moment. "Don't blame yourself," he said firmly. "We both got caught up in things we didn't understand. But we're learning. And that's all we can do." Emily took a deep breath, feeling the tension in her chest start to loosen. His words felt like a lifeline, something she had been reaching for but hadn't known how to find. Maybe she wasn't the only one who had to learn from this. Maybe they could learn together. "I'm scared," Emily admitted, her voice small. "I'm scared that I'll mess up again, that I'll make the same mistakes. I don't know how to fix everything, Justin." "You don't have to fix everything," he said softly, squeezing her hand. "You just have to be real with me. That's all I need. The rest, we'll figure it out." The sincerity in his voice was enough to calm some of the lingering fears in her heart. It was a slow burn, a rebuilding of trust, a quiet, steady growth between them. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't always easy, but it was real. And for the first time, Emily allowed herself to believe that maybe that was enough. They spent the rest of the evening talking about small things, the kind of things that didn't carry the weight of their past or their future. They talked about their favorite books, movies they had enjoyed, and the places they dreamed of visiting one day. It was simple, light, but it felt right. As the night wore on, Justin stood up, stretching his arms. "I'm gonna head to bed," he said, his voice quieter now. "But thanks for tonight, Em. It was nice, just, being together without all the pressure." Emily smiled, nodding. "It was nice. Good night, Justin." "Good night," he replied, his eyes lingering on hers for a moment before he turned and left the room. She sat there for a while, the quiet of the cabin enveloping her. Her mind was still racing, but now, it felt different. There was a sense of calm in her heart, a tiny spark of hope that had been rekindled. She wasn't sure what the future held, or if this would even last. But for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was in control. She stood up, placing her empty tea mug in the sink, and walked to the window. The moon was high in the sky, casting a soft glow over the landscape. It was peaceful, serene. And for a moment, Emily allowed herself to imagine a future where things were different, where they had both healed, and where they could move forward together. She didn't have all the answers. But tonight, she didn't need to. The following week passed with an unexpected sense of calm. Emily and Justin continued to spend time together, and their conversations, though not always deep, began to feel more natural. It was as if the weight of their past was slowly lifting, inch by inch. They shared meals, took walks in the quiet woods surrounding the cabin, and even spent a lazy Sunday afternoon curled up on the couch watching old movies. For the first time in a long time, Emily allowed herself to feel, well, happy. But life, as it often does, had other plans. It started with a phone call from Sarah. Emily was in the kitchen, preparing dinner when her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and saw her best friend's name. "Hey, Sarah. What's up?" Emily answered, wiping her hands on a towel. "Emily," Sarah's voice came through, tight with urgency. "You won't believe what I heard. Justin's been spotted out with someone else." The words hit her like a slap. Emily froze, the towel slipping from her hand and falling to the floor. She stared at the phone in disbelief. "What do you mean?" Emily asked, her heart suddenly racing. "What are you talking about?" Sarah's voice softened, but there was no mistaking the edge of concern. "I'm not sure of the details, but there's gossip going around. A couple of people saw him with a woman at a party last night. I think they were more than just friends, Em. It looked like a date." Emily's stomach churned. She leaned against the kitchen counter, her mind whirling. Could it be true? She had been so focused on the small steps they'd been taking together, the slow rebuilding of trust, that she hadn't even thought to look for signs of trouble. Had she been so caught up in the fragile hope of their reconciliation that she ignored the reality? "Sarah, are you sure?" Emily asked, her voice shaking slightly. "This doesn't sound like something Justin would do. I mean, we've only been spending time together. He promised he was in this for real. I'm not saying you should freak out, but you need to know what's going on," Sarah continued. "I just don't want you to get hurt again." Emily sat down at the kitchen table, her hands trembling. The conversation was a blur after that. She ended the call with a vague promise to think things through, but the truth was, she didn't know what to think. She couldn't process it all in that moment. Justin had seemed so sincere, so patient. How could he have been seeing someone else? Was she just a distraction, something temporary until something better came along? Or was this some kind of misunderstanding? Her mind raced back to everything they had shared, the quiet nights in the cabin, the sweet gestures, the way he had looked at her with that familiar warmth in his eyes. But now, a gnawing doubt had crept into her chest. Was it all just a facade? She knew she had to talk to him. But what if she was wrong? What if she was reading too much into this? The thought terrified her. Justin had promised her that he was ready to rebuild, that he wanted to try again. Was this just another sign that he was still the man who couldn't commit? Or was there more to this story? That night, Emily couldn't sleep. Her mind wouldn't quiet down. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Justin with another woman, laughing, holding her hand, sharing moments that Emily had hoped would be theirs. She couldn't shake the image. The next morning, Justin arrived at the cabin as planned. He smiled when he saw her, as if nothing had changed. But Emily was a million miles away, her heart heavy with the questions she couldn't ignore anymore. "Hey, Em. How are you?" Justin asked, walking into the kitchen. His voice was light, but there was a hint of concern when he saw her expression. "I need to talk to you," Emily said, her voice strained. "I heard something, and I need you to explain." Justin frowned, his brows knitting together. "What do you mean? What did you hear?" Emily's hands clenched into fists at her sides. She wanted to be calm, wanted to have this conversation without letting the anger take over, but it was hard. Every instinct in her body told her to be angry, to demand answers. But she needed to know the truth first. "I heard you were seen with someone else," she said, her voice wavering only slightly. "At a party. Was that true?" Justin's face went pale, and for a brief second, Emily saw a flash of guilt in his eyes. But just as quickly, it was gone, replaced by confusion. That's not what you think," he said, his voice tight. I don't know who told you that, but it's not true. I've been working, spending time with you. I haven't been out with anyone else." Emily took a deep breath, trying to keep herself together. "Sarah heard it from someone who saw you there. Don't lie to me, Justin. If there's something going on, I need to know." He opened his mouth to respond but then stopped, clearly struggling to find the right words. Finally, he looked down at the floor and sighed. "It's true, I was at a party," he admitted. "But it wasn't like that. I went with a few people from the studio. I've been talking to someone, but it's nothing serious, I swear. I wasn't trying to hide it from you, I didn't know how to explain it." Emily's heart hammered in her chest. She couldn't tell if he was telling the truth, but the fact that he hadn't mentioned this woman at all, hadn't even hinted at it, made her feel betrayed. She had given him her trust, and he had let it slip through his fingers without a second thought. "You're telling me it's nothing serious?" Emily's voice shook, the hurt clear in her tone. "Then why didn't you say anything? Why keep it from me?" "I didn't want to hurt you," Justin said softly. "I didn't think it would matter. I didn't think I was doing anything wrong. Didn't think it would matter." Emily echoed, her voice rising in frustration. "You're not being fair to me, Justin. You're not being honest with me. I can't do this. I can't keep putting myself through this uncertainty." She turned away from him, walking toward the door. She needed air, space. She needed to think. Wait," Justin called after her, but she didn't turn around. She couldn't look at him. Not right now. She didn't know what she expected when she confronted him, but the truth felt worse than she had imagined. She had trusted him to be better, to be different. And now, standing there with the weight of his lies in the air between them, Emily realized that she might have made a terrible mistake. Emily walked out into the cold morning air, her breath visible in the crisp breeze. The world felt muffled, like it was holding its breath, waiting for her to figure out what to do next. Her thoughts were a whirlwind, each one crashing into the other with a ferocity that made her head spin. How had everything gotten so complicated? She couldn't shake the image of Justin with another woman. He had promised her that they were taking things slowly, that he wanted to rebuild trust. But now, there was a seed of doubt that had been planted deep within her, and she wasn't sure how to water it away. The tension between them felt palpable as she paced the yard, her hands stuffed deep into the pockets of her coat. Her heart thudded heavily in her chest, the weight of disappointment pulling her down. She didn't know how long she had been walking when she heard the familiar sound of Justin's footsteps behind her. He must have followed her out when she left the cabin, no doubt trying to make sense of the chaos he'd just created. Wait, please," Justin called out, his voice laced with panic. Emily stopped but didn't turn around. She couldn't bring herself to look him in the eye yet. She needed space. She needed clarity. "Why didn't you tell me about her?" Emily asked, her voice thin with the cold. "Why didn't you tell me you were seeing someone?" "I wasn't seeing her, Emily," Justin pleaded, his voice coming closer. "I swear to you. It wasn't what it looked like." Turning to face him finally, she could see the desperation in his eyes, the way his hands were trembling as they ran through his hair. But despite his words, a part of her couldn't ignore the sinking feeling in her stomach. She had trusted him, and he had lied. "You don't get it, Justin," Emily said, shaking her head. "I don't care about the details of what happened or what didn't happen. What hurts is that you didn't trust me enough to tell me the truth. You kept it from me. Why?" Justin opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. For a moment, they just stood there, the wind whipping around them, but neither of them moved. It was as if the entire world was waiting for Justin to give the answer Emily so desperately needed. Finally, he took a step closer, his face softening. "I didn't tell you because I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't want you to think that I was moving on before we had even had a chance to fix things. I thought I could handle it on my own, but clearly, I was wrong. Emily's heart felt like it was breaking into 1,000 pieces as she listened to him. She had wanted to believe him so badly. She had wanted to trust him again. But now, the cracks in their relationship felt too wide, too deep to ignore. I just don't understand, Justin, she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. I gave you everything. I gave you my heart, my trust. And now? I don't know what to believe anymore. He stepped closer, gently reaching for her hand, but she pulled away from him. His touch, once comforting, now felt like a reminder of everything that had gone wrong. I know, Justin said quietly, his voice cracking with emotion. I know I hurt you. And I wish I could take it all back. I don't want to lose you, Em. But I understand if you can't forgive me. I love you. The words hung in the air between them, heavy and unresolved. Emily took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She wanted to believe him. God, how she wanted to. But the truth was, she wasn't sure anymore. The promises, the moments they had shared, they all felt like fragments of something that no longer existed. I don't know what to do, Justin, she said softly, her voice full of exhaustion. I don't know if I can keep doing this. I don't know if I can keep giving you chances and hoping that you'll change. I'm scared. Her words hit him like a blow, and she saw the pain flash across his face. But there was also something else, a realization that maybe, just maybe, this was the breaking point. I don't want to be the guy who keeps letting you down, he said, his voice raw with emotion. But I know I've already crossed that line. I can't undo what I've done. I can only show you that I'm willing to change, to fight for us. If you can't see that, I'll understand. But please, just know that I'm sorry. A cold gust of wind whipped through the yard, and Emily wrapped her arms around herself, trying to shield herself from the chill that seemed to be closing in on her heart. I need time, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I need time to think. I can't make any decisions right now, Justin. I'm not sure what I want anymore. Justin nodded, his expression one of helplessness and resignation. I understand. Take all the time you need. But please, just know that I'm not going anywhere. I'm here. And I'll be here when you're ready. With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Emily standing alone in the yard, the weight of their broken connection hanging heavily in the air. For the rest of the day, Emily stayed in the cabin, unable to focus on anything. Her thoughts kept drifting back to Justin, his promises, his mistakes, the way he had seemed so sincere when he told her he was committed. But how could she trust him again after this? How could she believe anything he said? She didn't know. But she knew one thing for sure, she couldn't keep living in the uncertainty. She couldn't keep putting herself through this emotional roller coaster. That night, after Justin had left for the evening, Emily sat in the dimly lit living room, staring out at the quiet darkness outside. Her phone buzzed with a message from Sarah, but Emily didn't open it. She wasn't ready for advice, wasn't ready for someone else's opinion. She needed to make her own decision, in her own time. And yet, she still didn't know what that decision would be. Days passed in a blur. Emily spent her time pacing around the cabin, her mind constantly swirling with the same questions. The image of Justin's face, the hurt in his eyes, and the uncertainty in his voice replayed in her mind over and over. Every part of her wanted to believe him, but something inside her had shifted. How many times could she forgive him? How many chances was too many? She had spent years believing in him, in them, and yet here they were, at the crossroads again. The trust that had taken so long to rebuild was now hanging by a thread, and every step she took seemed to pull her further from the person she once thought he was. One afternoon, as Emily sat by the fire, wrapped in a blanket, there was a knock on the door. She wasn't expecting anyone. It was still early, and Justin hadn't come by yet. She slowly stood up, her legs a little stiff from sitting for so long, and walked toward the door. When she opened it, her breath caught in her throat. It was Sarah. "I didn't know if you'd be home," Sarah said, offering a small smile. "I was worried about you." Emily stepped aside, letting her friend in. Sarah's presence was a relief. She hadn't seen her in a few days, and though the words Sarah had shared with her before still stung, she needed to talk to someone who could offer perspective. "Thanks for coming," Emily said softly as she led Sarah into the living room. I don't know what to do anymore." "About Justin?" Sarah asked, sitting down beside her on the couch. Emily nodded, wrapping the blanket tighter around her shoulders as she sank into the couch. "I want to believe him. I want to think that maybe this time, things could be different. But I can't shake the feeling that I'm just setting myself up for more disappointment. I don't know if I can keep forgiving him for everything." Sarah placed a comforting hand on Emily's, her voice gentle but firm. "You don't have to forgive him all at once, Em. And you don't have to have all the answers right now. You need to listen to your heart. What does it tell you?" Emily looked at Sarah, her heart heavy with indecision. "I don't even know what my heart wants anymore. Part of me still loves him, and part of me wants to walk away from it all. I'm scared that if I stay, I'll just end up hurt again. But if I leave, I'll lose him, and maybe that's something I'm not ready to do either." For a long time, neither of them spoke. The silence in the room was thick with the weight of Emily's turmoil. She stared into the fire, watching the flames dance and crackle, as though searching for some sign, some answer that would give her the clarity she so desperately needed. "I can't tell you what to do, Em," Sarah finally said. "But I do know one thing. If you stay, you need to trust him again. And if you can't, then maybe it's time to walk away for good." The words hit Emily like a hammer. She had been holding on to something, clinging to the idea of them, of a future where everything worked out, where Justin was the man she needed him to be. But Sarah was right. She couldn't keep living in this constant state of doubt. She couldn't continue walking down a path that left her questioning everything about their relationship. She had to make a choice. Later that evening, after Sarah had left, Emily found herself sitting on the porch, staring out at the darkened landscape. The stars twinkled above, each one a tiny light in the vast emptiness. She thought about all the moments she had shared with Justin, the late-night talks, the laughter, the moments of quiet understanding. But she also thought about the lies, the secrets, the pain that had come with those same moments. The love they shared wasn't enough to erase the hurt. And the hurt wasn't enough to make her forget the love. Emily was torn in two, and it was as if no matter which choice she made, she would be losing something important. She heard the familiar sound of a car pulling into the driveway. Justin had come, just like he always did. But this time, Emily wasn't sure if she was ready to face him. She took a deep breath, then slowly stood up. The choice had to be made. There was no running from it anymore. When Justin walked through the door, his eyes searched hers immediately. He looked exhausted, but there was a quiet determination in his expression. He wanted to fix this. He wanted to make things right. But Emily wasn't sure if she could let him. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice steady but low. Justin nodded, closing the door behind him. "Of course. Anything." Emily motioned for him to sit down, then took a seat across from him. She was quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts. She couldn't let him speak first this time. Not until she had said what she needed to say. "I've been thinking," Emily began, her voice trembling slightly. "And I've realized something. I can't keep doing this. I can't keep trying to put the pieces back together when I'm not sure they'll ever fit again." Justin's face faltered. He opened his mouth to say something, but Emily held up her hand to stop him. "Let me finish," she said, her tone gentle but firm. "I don't want to lose you. I still care about you, more than you know. But I can't pretend like everything's okay when I'm drowning in doubt. I need you to understand something, I can't trust you anymore. And I can't keep waiting for that trust to come back, because it might never happen. Justin's face paled, and for a moment, Emily saw something close to panic flash across his features. Please. No, she interrupted, her voice growing stronger. I've been holding on to something that doesn't exist. I've been holding on to a future that I thought was real, but it's not. I need to take care of myself now. I need to stop waiting for you to change, for you to show up as the person I want you to be. I have to choose me. The words stung, but as they left her mouth, something in Emily felt lighter. She had said the truth. It wasn't easy, and it hurt more than she thought it would, but it was the only way forward. Justin sat silently, his face a mixture of pain and understanding. His eyes were glassy, but he didn't argue. He didn't try to change her mind. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. And I hate myself for it. Emily nodded, her throat tight. I know you're sorry. But sorry isn't enough anymore. With that, she stood up. There was nothing more to say. The decision was made. As Justin stood, a sadness settled over his face. I'll go, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. But just know. I'll never stop caring about you. And with that, he left. The door closed quietly behind him. Emily stood in the stillness of the cabin, the weight of the choice she had just made pressing on her chest. It wasn't easy. It wasn't what she had wanted. But it was what she needed. And for the first time in a long time, Emily felt like she could finally breathe. The silence in the cabin felt heavier than ever after Justin left. Emily sat down on the couch, her body exhausted from the emotional whirlwind that had just unfolded. She felt like she had just woken up from a long, blurry dream. For so long, she had been stuck in the past, replaying moments of happiness and disappointment over and over again. But now, the present felt like a weight lifting off her shoulders. It wasn't that she was completely free from the pain. No, that would take time. But she had made the choice, she had taken control of her life in a way she hadn't done in years. And that in itself was a victory. The evening passed quietly. Emily wrapped herself in the warmth of the blanket Sarah had brought her earlier. She spent the rest of the night making calls, organizing her thoughts, and reaching out to friends she hadn't spoken to in a while. It was the first step towards reclaiming her independence. The next day, she woke up with a sense of resolve. The fog that had clouded her mind for so long was finally starting to clear, and she could see a path ahead, one that wasn't tied to Justin, one that didn't depend on someone else's actions or decisions. She decided to take a walk in the woods near the cabin. She needed some time alone, time to reconnect with herself. She needed space to breathe without the constant pull of doubt and heartbreak. The walk was quiet, with only the sound of her footsteps crunching on the dry leaves beneath her boots. Her phone buzzed, breaking her reverie. She pulled it out of her pocket to see a message from Sarah. You good? You know I'm here if you need me. Emily smiled at the message. She quickly typed a reply, I'm okay. Just needed some time alone. I think I'm finally starting to figure things out. Sarah's response came almost immediately, I'm proud of you. You deserve the best, Em. Don't forget that. The words warmed her heart. Sarah had always been there for her, through every high and low, and now, she was there cheering her on as Emily took the next steps toward healing. As Emily sat there, feeling the peaceful stillness of the woods surround her, she realized something important. She didn't need someone else to define her happiness. She didn't need Justin to make her feel whole. She was enough, just as she was. Her thoughts shifted to the future. She wasn't sure what it would hold, but for the first time, she was excited about the possibilities. Maybe she would go back to school. Maybe she would travel. There were a million opportunities out there for her, and she no longer had to wait for permission to chase them. That afternoon, Emily decided to take a small but significant step forward. She picked up her phone and dialed a number she hadn't called in years. It was her old boss from the restaurant she used to work at, the one she had left when everything with Justin had started to unravel. "Hi, it's Emily," she said when the phone picked up. "I was wondering if you were hiring. I know it's been a while, but I think I'm ready to come back to work." Her old boss was happy to hear from her and immediately offered her a shift that weekend. It was a small step, but it felt monumental to Emily. It was a sign that she was moving forward, that she was taking control of her own life again. As she walked back to the cabin that afternoon, the weight in her chest had lessened. The pain of losing Justin was still there, but it no longer consumed her. She had made the hard choice, and now she could focus on herself. For the first time in a long while, Emily could see a future that was hers to shape. The next few days passed in a blur of small changes. Emily got back to work at the restaurant, reconnected with old friends, and even began to pick up some of the hobbies she had put aside when she was consumed by the drama of her relationship with Justin. She painted again, something she hadn't done in ages, and rediscovered the joy that came from creating something with her own two hands. But as much as Emily focused on rebuilding her life, she couldn't deny that a part of her still wondered about Justin. He hadn't contacted her since that night he left the cabin. She hadn't expected him to, but the silence still weighed on her. She wasn't sure if she was ready to face him again, not yet. But she knew that one day, when she was strong enough, they would need to have a final conversation, one where they could both acknowledge what had happened and move on, without any more lies or half-truths. Until then, Emily was content to take things one day at a time. She had a new beginning, and for the first time in a long time, she was looking forward to it. It had been a few weeks since Emily had made her decision. She had settled into her new routine with a sense of cautious optimism. Life was returning to a kind of normalcy. She was back at work, rekindling her relationships with friends, and even starting to feel like herself again, like the version of Emily she had lost sight of during her time with Justin. But there was still one thing lingering in the back of her mind, Justin. Despite everything that had happened, he still had a hold on her heart. She couldn't deny that. Every so often, she would hear about him from friends or on social media. His latest project, an album he was working on, a concert he was promoting. It was like he was still living in the world that once felt like hers too. And even though she told herself she was done with it all, a small part of her couldn't help but wonder, did he miss her? Was he thinking about her the way she was thinking about him? One evening, as Emily was leaving the restaurant, she saw a familiar face waiting for her outside. It was Sarah, leaning against the car, looking like she had something on her mind. "Hey, Sarah. What's up?" Emily asked, walking up to her. "I have some news," Sarah said, her expression a mix of excitement and hesitation. "It's about Justin." Emily felt her stomach tighten. She had tried to avoid thinking about him, but Sarah's words felt like an electric shock that jolted her out of her careful distance. "Okay," Emily replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "What about him?" "Some things have come to light," Sarah said, glancing around as if making sure no one was listening. "Things I didn't know until recently. Things that might change how you look at everything." Emily's heart pounded in her chest. "What do you mean?" Sarah took a deep breath. "I ran into a friend of his the other day. Someone from his team. And they told me something about why he did what he did, why he made all those choices that hurt you." Emily's mind raced, her thoughts tumbling over each other. She had heard so many excuses from Justin, so many explanations that felt hollow. What could be different this time? "What is it?" Emily asked, her voice barely a whisper. Sarah hesitated for a moment, then spoke in a low voice. "He was never really the one who wanted to end things. The betrayal, the lying, it wasn't entirely his fault. Emily's brow furrowed. What are you talking about? There's more to it, Sarah said, her voice filled with empathy. I didn't want to believe it either, but I've learned that Justin was forced into a situation. He was pressured by people around him, his manager, even his family, to hide things from you. They didn't want him to be with you. They thought you were holding him back, that you were a distraction from his career. The words hit Emily like a slap to the face. Forced. Pressured. She couldn't process it. No, Emily whispered, shaking her head. That can't be right. He made his own choices. He lied to me. He hurt me. I know, Sarah said, her eyes filled with sympathy. But you've got to understand, Justin's life wasn't his to control, not the way you think it was. He loved you, Em. I know he did. But he was trapped. The pressure from his team, the industry, it was suffocating. He didn't know how to handle it. And he made mistakes. Big ones. Emily felt her breath catch. She closed her eyes, trying to digest what Sarah was telling her. Could it be true? Could Justin really have been manipulated like that? The possibility of it sent a flood of conflicting emotions through her. Anger, confusion, disbelief. But deep down, a part of her still wanted to believe it. Still wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, Justin wasn't the villain in all of this. I don't know what to think anymore, Emily said, her voice barely audible. I feel like I've been living in a lie, Sarah. I trusted him, and he lied to me. He broke my heart. I know, Sarah said gently. But maybe the truth is more complicated than you think. Maybe it wasn't just Justin who made all the wrong choices. Maybe there were other forces at play. The air between them grew heavy. Emily didn't know what to say. Part of her wanted to scream, to let out all the pain and frustration she had bottled up. Another part of her wanted to run back to Justin, to demand answers, to demand the truth from him directly. But she had been here before. She had given him the benefit of the doubt. She had trusted him with her heart, and he had broken it. Could she really go back to him again? Was it possible to forgive him? To rebuild something that had been shattered? Sarah said, pulling her out of her thoughts. I'm not saying you have to forgive him or take him back. I just wanted you to know the full story. So you can make the decision that's best for you. The weight of Sarah's words lingered in the air. Emily felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down into the unknown. The path forward seemed uncertain, and she didn't know where it would lead. But one thing was clear, she couldn't make a decision without knowing the truth. That night, as Emily lay in bed, her mind raced. She thought about everything, about Justin, their time together, their love, and the lies that had torn them apart. She thought about the possibility of forgiveness, of healing, and what that might look like. Could she move forward with him? Or would she need to leave him behind for good? The next day, Emily made a decision. The morning light seeped through the curtains of Emily's bedroom, casting long shadows on the floor. She had hardly slept the night before, her mind still spinning from the conversation with Sarah. She could barely grasp the idea that Justin had been manipulated, that there had been forces at play behind the scenes of their relationship that she couldn't even begin to understand. The possibility that he hadn't been fully in control of his actions left her conflicted, like trying to piece together a puzzle without knowing where any of the pieces fit. As she sat up in bed, she knew what she had to do. She had to talk to Justin. She couldn't let this lingering doubt eat at her any longer. The only way she could begin to move forward, whether that meant reconciliation or closure, was by confronting him and hearing his side of the story. Emily had spent so much time trying to rebuild her life and reclaim her independence. But she also knew that avoiding the truth would only leave her haunted by unanswered questions. She grabbed her phone, her fingers hovering over the screen as she debated what to write. She didn't want to seem desperate, but she also needed clarity. After several minutes, she typed out a message. Justin, I need to talk to you. I can't keep going on without understanding what happened. Please let me know when you're free. It felt like a simple request, but it carried with it a weight that made her hands tremble. She pressed send and waited. It didn't take long for him to reply. I've been waiting for you to reach out. I know I owe you an explanation. Let's meet tomorrow, 3 p.m. at the old diner we used to go to. I'll be there. Her heart skipped a beat. There was something in his message, a certain urgency, that made her feel like she had stepped into a different world, a world where all the questions she had were about to be answered. The next day, Emily arrived at the diner early, her nerves a tangled mess of anticipation. The familiar neon sign that once felt like a symbol of carefree moments now felt like a threshold to a place she wasn't sure she was ready to face. She sat down at one of the booths by the window, her fingers nervously tracing the edge of her cup. When Justin walked in, her breath caught in her throat. He looked different, more worn out, like time had taken a toll on him in a way she hadn't anticipated. His eyes were tired, but they softened the moment they met hers. There was a mix of emotions in his gaze, guilt, sorrow, hope. Hey, he said quietly, sliding into the seat across from her. I'm glad you came. Emily nodded, not sure what to say. The last time they had seen each other, everything had been shattered. Now, here they were, on opposite sides of a story that had yet to be fully told. I've been thinking about everything, Justin began, breaking the silence. About what happened between us. And I owe you the truth. I should have told you everything sooner, but I was scared of losing you, scared of the people around me. The pressure, it was suffocating. Emily sat back, her heart pounding. This was it. This was the moment where everything she had wondered about would either fall into place or crumble even further. I was pressured by my manager, by my family, Justin continued, his voice heavy. They thought you were a distraction. They thought I needed to focus on my career, that I had to distance myself from you, from anything that could make me look vulnerable. I should have told you, but I didn't. I was so caught up in trying to please everyone else, I lost sight of what mattered. And that was you. I never meant to hurt you, Em. I swear I didn't. Emily listened carefully, her chest tight with a mixture of emotions. Part of her wanted to scream, to let out all the anger she had been holding inside for so long. The other part of her, the part that still loved him, wanted to believe him, to find some kind of peace in his words. But you lied to me, she said, her voice shaky. You told me things weren't a big deal. You said you needed space, that I was the problem. How could you do that to me? Justin's face crumpled, his hands clenched on the table in front of him. I was wrong. I didn't know how to explain it. I didn't know how to say that I was trapped, that I was being controlled by everyone around me. I thought if I kept pushing you away, you would leave me on your own, and I wouldn't have to be the one to do it. I was so scared of losing everything that I ended up losing the one person who actually mattered. Tears welled in Emily's eyes, but she blinked them away. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the explanation that she had yearned to hear. But even with the truth laid bare before her, she wasn't sure how to feel. You should have trusted me, she said softly, her voice cracking. If you had just trusted me, maybe we could have figured it out together. But instead, you pushed me away, and I was left in the dark, wondering if I wasn't good enough for you. Justin reached across the table, his hand hovering as if he were unsure whether to touch her. I'm so sorry, Em. I don't expect you to forgive me, and I know I don't deserve it. But I need you to know, from the bottom of my heart, that I never wanted to hurt you. The silence between them grew thick, heavy with unspoken emotions. Emily took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. The years of love, pain, and confusion were all bundled up in that moment, and she wasn't sure how to untangle it all. Could she forgive him? Could she move forward with him, knowing the truth? Justin, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, I need time. I don't know if I can forgive you yet, but I needed to hear this. I needed to know the truth. Justin nodded, his eyes filled with regret. Take all the time you need. I'll wait for you, Em. I'll wait as long as it takes. As Emily sat there, looking into the eyes of the man who had once been the center of her world, she realized something important: the past couldn't be changed. But the future, her future, was still unwritten. The days following her meeting with Justin were a whirlwind of emotions. Emily found herself reeling, unable to focus on much else. His words echoed in her mind, replaying over and over, as she tried to make sense of everything. She had finally heard the truth, but now she had to decide what to do with it. Her mind kept drifting back to the look in his eyes, the guilt, the sadness, the longing. She could see that he was sincere, that he truly regretted what had happened. But could sincerity and regret be enough? Could they erase the months of pain, the broken trust, and the heartache that had followed their breakup? As she sat in her apartment, staring out the window, she wondered if she would ever be able to move past the betrayal. She had worked so hard to rebuild her life, to rediscover who she was without him. Could she really go back to him? Could she trust him again? She spent the next few days reflecting on her feelings, trying to find some clarity. She reached out to her friends, seeking their advice and perspective. Sarah, in particular, had been her rock throughout all of this. Emily knew she needed to hear from someone who understood her, someone who could offer an outside perspective. One evening, Emily met Sarah for coffee at their favorite cafe. As they sat down at a quiet table by the window, Emily couldn't help but feel a sense of comfort. Sarah always knew the right thing to say, even when Emily wasn't sure what she needed. "So, how are you feeling?" Sarah asked gently, her eyes filled with concern. "About everything with Justin, I mean." Emily sighed, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. "I don't know, Sarah. Part of me wants to forgive him, wants to believe that things could be different. But then I remember everything, the lies, the betrayal. I don't know if I can ever move past that. I don't know if I can trust him again." Sarah nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I get it. It's hard, Em. You've been through so much. But you don't have to make any decisions right now. Take your time. You don't owe anyone an answer, especially not him. You need to figure out what's best for you." Emily took a deep breath, feeling a sense of relief wash over her. "I've been so focused on what I think I should do. What I think everyone expects me to do. But I haven't taken the time to really think about what I want." "Exactly," Sarah said, giving her a reassuring smile. "You've been through a lot, and you need to put yourself first for once. No one else's opinion matters in this situation. It's your heart, your life, your choice." For the first time in weeks, Emily felt a spark of clarity. She didn't need to have all the answers right now. She didn't need to rush into anything. She had the right to take her time, to process everything at her own pace. It was her future, and she was the one who had to live with whatever decision she made. The next few days were quieter. Emily kept to herself, spending time at the cafe, walking through the park, and allowing her thoughts to settle. She wasn't ready to make a decision about Justin yet, but she was beginning to feel more at peace with the idea of waiting. Maybe healing didn't mean jumping back into the past. Maybe it meant allowing herself the space to heal, to forgive, if and when she was ready. Then, one afternoon, as Emily walked home from work, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and saw a text from Justin. "Em, I know you're taking your time, but I just wanted you to know that I'm here. Whenever you're ready, I'm here. I'll always be here for you." It was simple, but the sincerity in his words hit her hard. She knew he wasn't asking for anything. He wasn't pressuring her. He was just there. And somehow, that meant more than all the promises and excuses he had given her before. Emily stood there on the sidewalk, the weight of the decision before her pressing down on her shoulders. She realized that forgiveness wasn't about excusing the past, it was about freeing herself from it. It wasn't about going back to what was, but about allowing herself to move forward, whether that meant giving Justin another chance or walking away for good. And that's when it hit her. She didn't need to decide right away. She could take her time, trust her instincts, and most importantly, trust herself. That evening, as Emily lay in bed, she thought about everything she had learned over the past few months. She had learned how to stand on her own, how to heal from wounds that once seemed impossible to overcome. She had learned that it was okay to be vulnerable, but it was also okay to protect her heart. As the days passed, Emily began to feel more and more like herself. She no longer felt like she was living in the shadow of the past. She was reclaiming her life, piece by piece. And when the time was right, she would make her decision about Justin. But for now, she was content to focus on her own journey. And whatever happened next, she knew she would be okay. Weeks had passed since Emily had last seen Justin. The painful emotions, the questions, and the uncertainties that had once clouded her mind had slowly begun to clear. She had found solace in her independence, in rediscovering who she was without the weight of her past relationship. Yet, the truth that Justin had shared with her still lingered in her thoughts, occasionally interrupting her peace like a fleeting storm. Now, as she sat in her favorite cafe, staring out at the city skyline, she felt the time had come. She had spent enough time reflecting, enough time focusing on herself. But it was time to finally decide what came next. Emily had learned a lot in the last few months. She had learned to trust herself, to make decisions based on her own needs and desires. Her friends, especially Sarah, had been instrumental in guiding her through the confusion. Sarah's words, "It's your heart, your life, your choice," still echoed in her mind, reminding her that no one else could make this decision for her. It was early afternoon when she received the text message from Justin. Her heart gave a slight jolt when she saw his name on her screen. I know you've been thinking things through. If you're ready, I'd love to talk. I'll be at the diner at 3 p.m. Let me know." She felt a mixture of anticipation and nerves tighten in her chest. She had known this moment was coming, but now that it was here, she wasn't sure if she was truly ready to face him. With a deep breath, she typed out a response. "I'll be there. See you at 3. As the time drew nearer, Emily found herself once again standing in front of the diner, the same place where so many of their good memories had been made, and where everything had come to an end. She hesitated before stepping inside, as if the walls themselves were holding on to fragments of the past she wasn't sure she was ready to confront. Justin was already sitting at their usual booth, looking as he always had when she first met him, full of hope, open, yet guarded. But there was something different about him now. The weight of what they had been through was visible in the way he carried himself. His shoulders were slumped, his face slightly more worn, and there was a quiet sadness in his eyes that spoke volumes. Emily slid into the booth across from him, her heart racing. She didn't speak right away. Instead, she just stared at him, as if trying to figure out what had changed in both of them since their last meeting. Finally, Justin broke the silence, his voice tentative but clear. "I've been waiting for this. I didn't want to rush you, but I'm hoping you've figured out what you need. I can't keep carrying this weight alone anymore." She nodded slowly, her eyes never leaving his. "I've been thinking about everything, Justin. About us. About how everything fell apart. I've spent so much time trying to heal, to rebuild my life on my own. And I thought that would be enough." She paused, looking out the window for a moment before turning back to him. "But the truth is, it hasn't been enough. I've had to confront my own feelings, my own past. And I've learned that I can't keep carrying the pain of what happened without understanding how to move forward. I needed to hear the truth from you, and I did." Justin's eyes softened, his hand reaching out across the table, though he didn't touch hers yet. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I don't expect you to just let me back in. I don't want to pressure you into anything. But I need you to know how deeply sorry I am. You've always meant so much to me, and it kills me that I hurt you. I know you're sorry, Emily whispered, her throat tight. But being sorry doesn't erase the past. It doesn't change the things I went through. And it doesn't change the trust we lost. They sat there in silence for a few moments, the weight of their conversation hanging in the air. Emily's mind was spinning, her heart caught between the love she once had for him and the pain that had followed it. I've learned a lot since everything fell apart, she said softly. And the most important thing I've learned is that I need to put myself first. I can't keep living in the past, hoping that things will go back to what they were. I've spent so much time trying to fix everything between us, but I've realized now that fixing me is what I need to focus on. Justin nodded, his expression pained but understanding. I get that, Em. I really do. And I'm not asking you to fix me or anything. I just want to know if there's a chance for us. A real chance. Not one that's clouded by manipulation or lies. Emily looked at him, her heart torn. Part of her wanted to reach out, to take his hand, to try again. But the other part of her knew that she couldn't go back to a relationship that had broken her trust. After a long moment, she finally spoke. I don't think we can go back to what we had, Justin. The truth is, I don't know if we can ever rebuild that trust. But I do know that I've grown so much on my own, and I can't ignore that. I don't need to be with anyone else right now. I need to be with myself. Justin looked down at the table, his jaw tightening, but he didn't argue. I understand. I'm not asking you to come back to me. I just wanted you to know that I'll always care about you. I'll always want the best for you, even if it's not with me. Emily swallowed the lump in her throat. I know. I care about you too, Justin. But I have to walk away now. For my own peace. I hope you can understand that. Justin nodded, and for the first time since their meeting began, he smiled. It wasn't a perfect smile, but it was a smile of acceptance. I do. And I'll always remember what we had. I'll always be grateful for it. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?